Okay, so first of all, thank you for letting me speak in English. I know Gina very well. I have no idea exactly what she said, but I wish I understood all the jokes. I'm sure it was amazing, and I'm sure I'm going to have a hard time following her. Okay, so I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about Waze because I want to talk about urban mobility and what we're going to be doing with all of this data that we're collecting from driving around and understanding speeds and locations and routing. But so you can be part of the story, Waze is a navigation real-time traffic application that's all crowdsourced. So more than 50 million people driving around the world, listening to their voice-guided turn-by-turn navigation, and sharing anonymously their speeds. So the point is, route you around accidents, hazards, traffic, reduce congestion, etc. Okay, so the kinds of information that we're collecting, in addition to the speeds and the routing, is we are really focused on things like where is the accident, where is the road closed. Most of you who use any GPS device or even mobile navigation application have been sent over a bridge that's closed or through a protest that the application didn't know was there. And what we'd like to do is make sure that since we're crowdsourced, all the information that's coming from those people are in one place so that we're not going to be sending you to the closed road. So we take all of that information and we distribute it out through a lot of channels. We want everyone to know it, not just inside of the application, but through 86 TV stations around the world who use us for their traffic information, through carriers who pre-install us on the device or the OEMs, and most importantly, through cities. We now have 23 cities around the world to bring in the Waze data into the traffic management centers to figure out how they can respond in real time to what's happening on the roads. So the kinds of things we're talking about are not just construction, parades, weather, but also in a crisis. We actually started this program because the White House contacted us one day during Hurricane Sandy and said, there's a fuel crisis in New Jersey. We don't understand what gas stations have fuel. They're 3 and 4 hour long lines, and we just don't know how to get this information. So we sent a push notification, the ones that I did catch that Gina doesn't like the push notifications in her pocket. Anyway, we sent one of those, and we requested people to ask us, or to let us know if they found a gas station that was open with power, and if so, how long the lines were. 10,000 people replied to that over the course of the weekend, and our emergency management system was able to use that data to figure out where to send the fuel trucks. So we're all sharing information, but the cities are obligated now to do something with it to make our lives better, right? That's the idea. So I'm going to show you a brief video that looks at Rio de Janeiro over the course of one day. So we're collecting a tremendous amount of information. What you saw was not a map. It was not a road grid. It was the actual GPS traces of the cars going on every street in Rio every single day, multiple times per day. And not just sharing speeds, but also where there's an accident, where there's a hazard, through voice prompts. There's a report a hazard, et cetera. One of the things we noticed in studying these patterns and this data across cities is that we have very different mobility needs depending on what city we live in. So in a city like Jakarta or Rio, they have a specific kind of problem, and it's the one on the bottom. It's a problem of capacity. Traffic starts in the morning, and it stays bad the entire day until everybody goes to bed. That's a capacity problem. They don't have enough roads or enough public transportation, whatever it is. There are too many cars for the road. The top one is what we see in Western Europe, in the US, which is peak travel problems. This is an issue of distribution. Everybody's trying to get onto the road at the same time, in the going to work and then in the afternoon commute. So we have to start thinking about what are the ways that we can solve both of those problems. And that's what brought us to this whole idea of the Connected Citizens program. So you have all heard about smart cities initiatives and technologies and infrastructure. And really, it's been an incredibly top-down Cities tell the citizens what they need. Here are the technologies we want to solve the problems that we've identified. But this is something very different. We need to give people access to the data so that we're really arming the citizens with the information so that they can figure out what are their own problems. They need to be able to identify problems that the government can't even see. So this is really, we're talking about a bottom-up approach right here. This is the city of Rio talking about...
In Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, traffic is a very important issue. We have almost 7 million people here, going from A to B to C to D. From the first phone call that we have, 2 weeks later, we were there inside of Waze application with APIs, bringing to the operations center every information that we agreed to share.
We have the channel, we have the data, and we need to shorten the distance between the citizens and the city hall.
With 400,000 Wazes in Rio de Janeiro, 50,000 users every day, it's like we have an army of public agents talking to us. As many Wazes that we have, the more this number grows, more efficient and more deeply this tool will work.
So this is not just saving the individual's time, the original mission, but also, is there a possibility to look at the city scale and save time for an entire city as a whole? And what do you do with that extra time when you're able to get there? So what's interesting about Rio is that they were the first to be onboarded. That's why I'm showing so much about Rio. Barcelona is also one of our partners, but we now have 23 cities, and you saw it. It's in Asia, it's in Europe, it's Latin America, it's the US. And these are cities that are all trying to solve different kinds of mobility challenges. And they're getting together, sometimes in person even, and they're sharing code, they're sharing data, they're sharing their case studies. Here are just a few that Rio have shared with us. They had 2 elections last year. In the first election, they had no insight into where people were going to be going. Where was the congestion going to be over the course of the day? What time were people going to go and vote? So they studied this information when it came in from Waze, and when the second election came across, they redistributed their traffic personnel to make sure that they were going to be able to reduce congestion. And they reduced it by something like 50% from the second election from the first. They're also using that information to place traffic monitoring cameras, because you would think that cities the size of Rio or Barcelona would have some insight into what was happening on the roads, and they really don't. Often the richer cities have sensors in highways or sometimes in secondary roads, but there's no way to really see what's happening where across the city, anywhere there's a driver. So traffic personnel also, this was a big surprise for us. They're using it to change their garbage collection and distribution routes. What they realized from the data was there was increased traffic congestion at the same time of day that they were having their garbage trucks out. And so they actually changed the routes. And not only that, they're now changing the distribution centers for it as well. So traffic was being caused by their garbage trucks, and now they can fix that. And then, of course, the easiest one, which is real-time response to incidents. There's an accident. In many cases, the accident will come in first through someone who's a citizen out there on the road, then will be able to come in from the police. That way they can figure out, connect it to the traffic camera if there's one nearby, see what kind of service they need to provide, and make sure they get to it right away. A couple of things that are happening in the US. Boston is using the information to give to their fire trucks as a validation of the route that they're given. We don't think that Waze is perfect right now for emergency response. We wouldn't want that to be the only reliable one. It's not why we were built, and there's a lot of validation that needs to go into that. However, they have never had an opportunity to get real-time traffic information at this scale before. So they're validating every route for every fire now with Waze data. Snowplow tracking. I don't know if you've been following the weather, but there has been a tremendous amount of snow on the whole East Coast. Cities have been shut down for weeks. And to help them out, they gave us, and they actually had feeds, right? These snowplows have a GPS device on it that track where they are. That information is now coming into Waze with a little snowplow icon so that you can see if the street that you want to drive down has already been plowed. These are small things, and we would never have identified them if we didn't have people out on the road, if we didn't have these partnerships to figure out what the real problems were. Okay, Los Angeles I actually think is the most interesting, and that is they have a huge distribution time. What would normally take you 40 minutes on a drive can take you 2.5 hours in peak commute time. We obviously have a lot of information about how long it's going to take at what time of day. If we're able to work together and recommend a specific time for people to leave for work, is that actually going to be able to soften those peaks? Still a test. Boston, They also allow you to report potholes that goes directly to the city, and they've made now a commitment that they will fix them within 48 hours. The most important thing about that is that they realize there's a moral obligation of the cities now to do something with the information. It's no longer okay just to say, all right, we have a lot of data, that's it. Citizens now are demanding they do something with it, and the best cities are figuring that out. Okay, now, I have this kind of hypothesis that's forming, and I'm sharing it with you, and it's completely unfinished in my mind, but I think it's kind of cool. So we think about those two problems, distribution and capacity. What is the world going to look like? What do cities need to do to figure out both of those problems in one? So I had just one idea, and it's this idea of iterative infrastructure. We think of transportation centers, right, where you go to catch the bus and the train, and they're very expensive to build, and it requires a complete overhaul of the city. In my mind, that's a bit of an old model. We're not going to have those mega transportation centers unless we're building a new city, and then we can do that and put them in the right places. But the point is, cities are dynamic. We need to think through distribution of those transit centers in a completely different way. People are going to be getting picked up differently. People are going to get more deliveries. Uber Eats is going to be bringing you every meal instead of someone else going out and getting it, and it's going to take a lot of cars off the road, right? So the idea is micro-hubs. The idea is that we go away from the huge transit center, and we come up with very simple structures that we can move around the city as our population changes, as a marathon occurs, and with dynamic routing and access to that information from your mobile phone or whatever else, you'll be able to figure out how the city can adapt. It might look like a bus shed. It might be that simple. The problem with mobility is that we don't think simply enough. If today there are 100 people going from one place to another, and tomorrow there are only 5, we'll be able to change these very simple, lightweight structures to accommodate different pickup points. Meeting points. Mobile World Congress completely changes the commute patterns, completely changes the people you're going to be meeting with. Why can't we have pop-up micro hubs for people to meet in an ad hoc way when tons of your colleagues are coming into town? This should be owned by the city, or at least thought of from the city. Right now, this is all being led by private companies, Waze, Uber, whatever, all of you guys maybe. But I think that the cities are going to need to think about this iterative infrastructure concept. Delivery points. I use Instacart a lot, which is, well, bring my groceries to me, kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm embarrassed in this way. I love all of these technologies that allow me to delegate everything I don't want to do, right? I have a career, I have kids, I have obligations, I don't want to do my own grocery shopping. Plus, when I'm in the store, I buy too much, and I buy chocolate and all that. So I use Instacart, and it delivers it to my house. Already, just by that happening, it's got me and everyone else using the service off the roads for that whole errand time. We have them picking up multiple orders for people in a specific neighborhood and then dropping them off over a whole window of time, say within a 4-hour block. So that's going to help with the peaks, and it's going to help get people off. Now, with micro hubs, what if we didn't even have to go all the way door to door? What if there were ways for me to pick up on the way home from work my orders from Google Shopping Express, from Amazon, from Uber, from Instacart, whatever, one place, micro hub. Parking to waiting. If we have micro hubs, then you have to think, all right, well, what am I going to, if it's a pickup point, what kind of vehicle am I going to be in? It's not this model where if we don't have big transit centers, we can't have big expensive light rails, but we also don't want people driving around in cars by themselves. So maybe it looks much more like a public-private van service. A lot of these are already being tested. So the van comes and picks you up, and you see it in your Uber-like interface. But the additional benefit to this is that those are all cars that are never going to be parked. They're going to be waiting. So we need to think less about parking lots and more about waiting lots, just like the cell phone areas in the airports. If we have pickup points, that also means that people are going to need to flock into places that are near their homes, their works, or whatever. It doesn't mean that you're going to get door-to-door service anymore. And I think that's a good thing. If you walked only 500 feet, I don't know, it was 140 meters or something like that, it's halfway around Plaza España, what would happen? And so I did a little calculation. Over 100 million commuters are driving alone in the US every single day. And they're driving 30 miles in total, 15 miles there, 15 miles back. If they walked to the pickup point and then to the office and then back again on the same way, they're not really having to suffer very much. And they're getting cars off the road to the equivalent of 38.5 million miles a day not driven just in the US. And of course, that has an economic impact as well. That's $22 million people would be spending on gas that they would no longer need to, just for walking to your micro-hub transit center. Okay. Cities are not ready to do this. Right? It's a nice idea. But there's a couple problems right now. They have all the data they need. Uber is giving them data, Move It is giving them data, Waze is giving them data. I'm sure Instacart is, all of these guys, everyone's going to open up their data to cities because we all want better cities. So who is going to create that personal transport platform that's going to be able to be used by the cities? We don't know. But the point is, we need to stop thinking about, we're not going to have the Amazon pickup point and the Uber pickup point and the Waze pickup point. There's going to be a common platform, and it's going to be something that is going to be public-private together. This is kind of the city's responsibility, I think, to push on this, and our responsibility to be open and share and all of that. So, iterative infrastructure, it's the pickup, it's the meeting, it's the distribution, it's the parking, it's a little walking, and all of that stuff makes a huge impact. And we haven't even started talking about that or that. Both of those are coming as well. But even without thinking futuristic technologies, so much more can be done with what we have.